I jumped in, you guys were talking about your phone issues, Rhonda.
Mhm.
It got me thinking. Um, so our phones become more elaborate through these devices that allow us to have conversation. Yet the irony is most people hate to be on the phone anymore.
Oh my
They
gosh.
they come up with all creative ways to avoid speaking to each other.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
this is our topic for today. It's the lost art of conversation.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, this is a good little segue into what we're going to actually talk about today, because it seems that, wherever you go, if you're put on a loop or on hold for some, important business matter or even a doctor's office, you get some type of automated computer bot or something. And then we get text messages and we get all these other ways of communicating, even social media. Um, but nobody's actually talking to each other. And I think it's a real problem. And it certainly applies to medicine. And so this is our topic for Inside the Doctor's Lounge for today. And I'd like to welcome our viewers today. I'm Dr. Desmond Bell, your host, with my colleagues and good friends, Rhonda Crow, the CEO of MD Coaches, Dr. Randy Cook, who also does a wonderful podcast called RX for Success, and the one, the only, they broke the mold with Dr. Rick Zollinger. So, all right, guys and ladies, what do you all think of this? I mean, a couple of years ago, I remember sitting in a doctor's appointment. It wasn't for me, and watching the doctor at a very famous clinic here in Jacksonville, where the doc never was talking face to face with the person that he should have been talking to, which was the patient. Occasionally spin around from the chair, but it was mostly the back and the computer. Super smart guy. And this was one of those examples to me of where things are starting to go to. We have lost this ability in all aspects of our lives to really communicate clearly, just the way we used to. And I had another example too. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference, and afterwards out to dinner with some friends, and kids came along too. The adults were at one end of the table, the kids were all at the other end of the table. They all had their phones out. I looked, and the adults were all having fun, talking to each other, laughing, having a drink. The kids, who you thought were having fun, were all on their phones with their heads down. And so I was like, man, is this what the younger generation of kids are doing? Is this how they're communicating? So it to me was kind of a disturbing moment because part of the fun of life is we're social creatures. We need each other. We talk to each other. We you know disagree. We laugh. We cry. Whatever we do, we need that human touch. And unfortunately, I think as the more elaborate ways of communicating are developed, we're finding ourselves further lost in the ability to communicate properly or appropriately, even. So, any thoughts on that, you guys?
Well, my pet peeve is, and I went through it this week, thinking of doctors' offices, and where you call in, and this doesn't have to be a physician's office, where you call in and say your call is important to us. Please hold. Our next available personal will be with you. And you go and you hang in there, and about 8 minutes later, you go, whose time's important here, yours or theirs? And I would rather they just said, nobody's available at this time, leave a message and we'll call you back, or something like that. And I think it's, so the gist of my story was, so I took my son and a very well-known orthopedic gentleman here, and he had personally told me, if you really want to get in to see me, the only way you'll get to talk to a human is just text me and I'll make an appointment for you. And that was how I greased the skids. But I tried. I went through the proper channels. I went online. I called the scheduling line. I never once got to a human being without texting the doctor on an end run. I thought, well, that's crazy. It's a 100-man practice.
Mhm.
So
Uh,
that was
you know, I'll
nobody wanted to talk to me.
I'll marry on to that, just a little bit of frustration. The ones that frustrate me are the are the ones that give you all kinds of options, but what you need to talk to a human about isn't among the options.
Not in the
So
Yeah.
that
list.
then where do you go?
Yeah, yeah. I know.
I always end up, my trick is always punch 0, and it
Yeah.
usually reroutes to at least getting you to a human somewhere.
I do that before they even get to the bottom of the menu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done the same thing, and I think that people have kind of gotten wise to that too. And now they'll say, well, your next available person will be, in the next 1 to 2 hours or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I just went through one of those last week.
I
Yeah,
feel
and
bad for you.
my glimmer of hope in this is that there are a small number of businesses that have tried to at least give you the opportunity to disconnect yourself from that time waster.
Yes.
I don't know if I should mention any in particular, but I know Delta Airlines. When you get in that queue, you'll very quickly get a message that says you can hang up and we'll call you back at the next available opportunity, and you won't lose your place in the queue,
Yes.
which is the consistent way to do it. I'm sure it costs them some bucks, but that at least indicates that they have some respect for your time.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
but back to your point, I know that there was something else you wanted to talk about, Des, and that is, have we lost the ability to talk to somebody, even if we can get them on the phone? And the
Well,
answer is yes.
and that's
Answer is
that
yes.
ability to communicate. Rick, when you started talking about your orthopedic surgeon friend or that guy being able to go, he helped you expedite communication with him. And so that got me thinking too. I don't know if you guys have ever done this too, even with patients. I know in wound care, I want to know if my patients are going bad or if something's happening. So I would freely give out my number to my patients. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because I found that they never abused that.
Almost never call. I had the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And you know what? It's almost like that. Maybe it's because of wound care, because we get to know our patients and we'd see them frequently. And they would always respect my time too. But
Mhm.
I would say, please do not be afraid to call me. I will, I want you to call me if
Mhm.
something happens.
Listen, I found the same thing when I was doing highly complicated surgery in the operating room day in and day out. I just, uh, in all the years that I did that, I had maybe two uh, really idiotic calls, and that's a pretty good record considering the number of people that I operated on.
And Randy, let me ask you this: in reviewing mentally in your mind what some of those calls, um, you know, I certainly would much rather have somebody call me before it turns into a disaster.
Of course.
Can you recall any potential disasters that were averted because somebody did, get in touch with you?
Absolutely. There were, fortunately, not a great number of those, but there were a few, two or three perhaps over those years where before they even got to the end of the first sentence, I said, meet me in the emergency room. I need to see you right now.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
yeah, that, that, that sort of thing is really critical. And I was very happy that they were able to get to me directly.
And it did something. Do you think that approachability or that accessibility with your patients is something that you also saw your colleagues taking on that kind of mindset, or did you see more of a pushback, like don't ever call, like they would
Mhm.
never give out their number, call the answering service or call 911 or whatever?
I wouldn't know what the statistical array would look like, but you saw instances of both and variations on all those things. Some people, just in their approach to what we do and recognizing the fact that patients will get into trouble, some people take the attitude that it's not healthy for me and it's not healthy for the patient to be always available. And I'm going to respect that. If they've got somebody that's on call for them, and that your patient can get in touch with that person, it's a perfectly reasonable way to do it. My approach is that even if I'm not on call, it's perfectly all right with me if the patient calls me, and I can call the guy on call because I know he's going to answer me when I call, and expedite the whole process. I just, I'm just like you. I've never uh, feared that patients would abuse that privilege, and indeed, they almost never did.
Yeah, and so again, because of your ability to communicate, um, again, that from their end, they felt like, okay, Dr. Cook is looking out for me. I know what my job is in all this. It was conveyed to them too.
Yeah.
And so, when we, kind of going back to this original topic, to the idea of, have we lost the ability to communicate in some ways? How we read people, how we, look at their body language, or even how they, just the tone of somebody's voice is all telling. And sometimes this is lost through the trying to convey a message through email or a text message. So I'm wondering, as we have a new generation of young docs coming up, and I'm not bashing them by any means, it's a different time. Their skill sets are different maybe than ours. We were socialized. Even the shy ones among us had to learn how to be, conversant with other people. You have to interact socially. That's one of the reasons people push for kids to be in school versus homeschool. It's the socialization process. It's so important. But we're losing some of this, I fear. And with that comes that ability to recognize, signals from somebody, or, how we interpret things. So do you all see, as medicine continues to evolve, the technologies that we have, again, whether it's computer, whether it's, telemedicine even, are we going to lose some more of our, skill set in a sense because of that inability to communicate?
Well, I feel like, and we've had this conversation before about the silos, and how everybody's in their own silo, and especially in the hospital situation. And you guys were closer to surgery than I was, but with hospitalists, and the head doesn't know what the tail's doing on the same patient, and that kind of communication. And it's funny, I was reading something today, and I don't know if it was when I read Dr. Leap's article or what it was, but one of the points was about, we need to go back to undergraduate and identify. I don't know if it's through like this testing. I just did that testing. You had me do the Gallup thing, and it gave my 5 biggest traits, and I'm not telling you any of them. But anyway,
Oh, we can guess. Don't worry.
yeah, okay. But the deal was whether or not you need to go back to the undergraduate level and identify the people who show empathy, who show the ability to converse with people, as opposed to, I used to call them the pocket protector guys, who came through and they got 4.0s and they had these pens and they couldn't open the door, but they got into Harvard Medical School. And I'm going, I think you got to go back and start there. I think you could work on the communication level, starting at the right at the beginning.
Oh man, they're definitely that first day of school. I remember walking and looking around the room and saying, "Man, that guy better not be anywhere near patients. He needs to be off in a lab somewhere."
And yeah, let's face it, there are some people that need to be in the lab, and
That's right.
we need those folks. There's no question
and
about
they're
that.
brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
No question.
There's a lid for every pot, and there's a seat for every ass.
Let's hope.
Is that your dad's quote again? I don't know.
No, that was an old Jewish printer up in New Jersey.
Okay.
That one stayed with me.
I don't know if I've ever shared with you guys before or not, but there's a lengthy story about my progress through medical school. And when I finished the basic science courses, because of a lot of things, there were no spaces for the people in my class for the junior clinical clerkships. So they had to find things for us to do. And I actually went off to a totally different city about 100 miles up the road, and was one of the very first medical students to show up at a new medical school. They sent like 8 or 10 of us up there, I think. And it was going to be the University of Alabama Huntsville School of Primary Medical Care. And the person who was there as the person who was sent to establish this medical school was a guy named Dr. Gail Stevens, who ultimately would be instrumental in establishing family practice as a recognized medical specialty. And those 2 months that I spent there did more for me to learn better respect for how to communicate to patients, and much more importantly, how to listen to patients and watch their body language and understand the nonverbal cues than I got any place else in any of my medical training. It's unquestionably one of the 3 or 4 most important things that happened to me in my medical education. I don't know if that sort of message gets transmitted anymore or not.
Well, yeah, I seriously would doubt that. And, you know, again, this goes back to conversation. Conversation is two-way, but it involves what you just touched on, Randy, active listening. A lot of times when we're talking to each other, we're not really listening to the other person. You're already trying to think of what you're going to say to them back in response. And sometimes try this little trick. If you're at a party or you're even involved in a conversation, take a step back and observe how people have a conversation. They're not even paying attention to each other. They're not listening. I see it in my own family. This is what I'm saying. I grew up around it. Loudmouth Italians. It just, I'm getting into the whole ethnic thing today. I apologize. We're not trying to offend anybody. But no, it's fascinating because, we say you're not hearing me or you didn't listen. And anybody who's been married for any length of time understands that too. But, it's that really trying to listen. And one of the pearls that I learned along the way too, it's in sales training. It was in sales training. Before I ever went back to school, some of you may know this, I was in sales for 5 years before I went and did my pre-medical stuff. And one of the most invaluable little tips that I learned in sales training was that, just listen. Once that customer starts doing all the talking, you pretty much have the sale made. So don't try to talk over them. Don't keep offering more information, but just sit back and listen, and you will get so much information that way. I also learned how in medicine, as in sales, you have to really be selective when you are leading the conversation too, when you're interviewing your patients. It's not good to ask an open-ended question like, how are you today? It's like, you should really kind of focus in because you might get, instead of saying, hey, how are you? You might get a friendly, typical response. I'm doing great. How are you? You may get the whole litany of things, and then you can't stop those guys who don't stop talking, and it's burning up your time. So learning how the art of interviewing and conversation are really skills that they are so vital to being, I think, a good physician. They really are.
I listened to that TED Talk you guys got me to listen to from 2011, and that's fabulous. Yeah, and he gives it in Edinburgh. Talks about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and all this stuff. And he gives a story about some famous physician in Edinburgh. I can't remember. Maybe it was, I don't remember. Anyways, about all the things he picked up without the spoken word by walking into the room and looking at the patient while we were talking about it. He notices their skin color and their hair and their quality of their, everything about them while they talk. And then he gave the story, which I thought this was a fabulous one. So in this day and age, when he would walk in and realize he couldn't possibly know the whole story in 45 minutes, he let the patient just talk. And for that hour, the patient gave him the history and he didn't say anything. He just listened. And then when he came back the next time, he did the physical. And the niche, what I'm trying to say, whatever it was, between the two of them was amazing. And I thought, God, what a great idea. I don't know that I could have done that. Maybe at Stanford where he was, but golly, I thought, well, that's if you had a really hard patient, somebody very difficult.
It is. You know, do you realize it made me think too, you imagine the patient satisfaction?
Oh,
Because I love my doc. He listened to me. He didn't tell you one thing, give you one bit of advice, but he listened to you. And I think that's what a lot of people want too. They
he made his point. Listen.
Yeah, well, his new patient appointment was 2 visits, to your
Right.
point, Rick, and it was constructed that way. And to me, it's a stroke of genius.
Yes.
It's an absolute stroke of genius, because for 45 minutes, in their own words, which is what you want history to come from your patient, they're telling you everything. Now, you may have to pick apart, what's in there, but an experienced physician is going to be able to hear a few things here and there and proceed with that. And then to have them come back on their second visit because it's all been laid out on the table, now I can thoroughly check everything that you've talked about. It's genius. And as I heard that, I was thinking, I wish I had that experience.
Well, I thought
yes.
that and then he came back with a personal touch and did his exam, and throughout that, and he said he came through the era of AIDS patients, and even when he had a patient dying, they would pull open their shirt because they expected him to palpate and do everything he always did. They weren't going to get gypped on their last visit. And I thought, good golly, that's just brilliant. That's brilliant healthcare that guy was.
Absolutely.
Well, it was the depth of the relationship. That's a very striking story that he tells about his patient who just hours before he died was going through the ritual of opening his shirt so he could be examined again by his trusted physician. And that doesn't happen overnight. That happens through being consistent and laying on hands and developing that relationship. That is a skill. And it's one that needs to, encourage is not the right word, but it really needs to be revered, that it is so valuable that it needs to have, I think, a higher priority in how we respect that within our culture.
I have one other old-timer story for you along exactly those lines. I was also quite blessed early in my career to spend some time with the famous Dr. Tinsley Harrison, who literally wrote the book on internal medicine. And we would, during my first year in medical school, we were privileged to go and hear him discuss a patient that they would present. And one particular Tuesday afternoon, he decided to present himself, and he told the story about his heart disease. But woven into all that, this is the man who actually established the American College of Cardiology. Woven into that, he told about an experience that he had when he was young and stupid. He was an intern at Johns Hopkins, and he said one of these people, this woman came in, and she was one of those people who you ask her what time it is, and she wants to tell you how to make a watch, the type, and it was just on, and she just talked incessantly, and there was so much stuff. And buried into all of that was this fleeting reference to crushing pain up here in my chest that sort of goes up in my neck, but it just went by, and he let it go. And this woman left the examination, walked out onto the street, and dropped dead from a heart attack. That event he took to heart, literally, and recognized that he was not listening close enough. And he was a great believer that if you will listen to the patient, they will give you the diagnosis, but you gotta listen. You got to hear everything, and you got to respect what they have to say. And, if a guy like Tinsley Harrison is telling you that, I think you got to believe it. So it is truly something that I'm afraid is being lost. And I'm hoping that somebody's going to find a way to turn it around, because it doesn't make any difference. Even if you get one of those little tricorder things that they had on Star Trek, sooner or later, you're just going to have to listen to the patient.
I think somebody and we've had this discussion, Randy, of guys of our ilk, about three of us, Rhonda included, although she's younger, they need to come back and have courses in the junior year or maybe at the end of the sophomore year that teach the art of medicine. It's nothing to do with anatomy, and it's just the art of medicine. Listening, not just ordering an MRI, listening, asking about family, whatever it is. There's a real I think a real need there. I could be and you could song and dance that everywhere. I just think,
that was the part of medicine that I loved the most too.
yeah.
Really, I mean, I look, the science, all that stuff was fantastic, great. But man, just the ability to get to know people and to help them solve, their pain point or their problem, whatever it was, but to use our knowledge our knowledge set and our skill set to do that, it was so rewarding. And it just came down to always putting yourself in the patient's shoes, or imagine yourself being in that chair, or if that was one of your loved ones, just following the golden rule too. But it just we don't always listen. It's like we have, like, as a society, it's almost become ADD everywhere, and or ADHD, and it's man, the attention span of people has diminished exponentially with everything that's gone on too, with technology boom.
And Rick, I very much agree with you about the loss of older mentors in medical schools. I know back in the mid-90s, there was a mass dump of tenured professors. They just got bought out because they were felt to be too expensive. And that kind of experience, that kind of wisdom is not something that you can put a price tag on, in my opinion, but it sure happened. And I don't know if that continues to be the case or not, but the respect and the recognition of the value of the people with the experience is something that I just don't really see much evidence of anymore.
No, I think I try to wonder if in other professions, I mean, it's not unique to medicine. A little bit of this color hair goes a long way in teaching the younger folks. And I think in an investment world or construction or whatever, I'm sure maybe that's held that way. It always was for us. And I just feel like somehow that ought to be brought in. And maybe this venue, like what we're doing here, and eventually with some classes or whatever, that's how you do it. And maybe that's a good thing, Des, because maybe we can communicate with a huge volume of people that we could never do before. I mean, we could do something like this and you're talking to kids that are in Australia, because we just do a Zoom, here's a Zoom art of medicine with these three yin yangs for 16 minutes.
It's true.
Which three are you talking about, Rick?
Well, I mean, there are actually 4 yin yangs here, I guess.
It's too late, man.
I'm yang.
I'm the yin to your yang.
I've been digging a lot of holes here.
I think that's the challenge, though. It always has been, and it always will be. And we can go back through time. It's marrying whatever the new thing is, with the sage, the experience, with what we've learned, and making it a more improved experience. That's the challenge. And that's where all the smart people and all the brains out there need to apply their expertise. Rick, you mentioned our friend Ed Leap, who wrote a great blog article that we posted today. He actually gave a suggestion for supporting both. And, everybody's frustrated with utilizing the EHR, and even Dr. Abraham Verghese in his TED Talk talked about, the eye patient, the patient within the computer gets great care, lots of attention, but
Yeah.
it's the patient who's actually sitting on the examination table who feels ignored, doesn't know what's going on, doesn't know, nobody talks to them because everybody's talking to the patient in the computer. And, Ed made a comment that, we really need to marry and embrace that, but and do it in such a way that it is advancing the practice of medicine. Why not have your doctor be able to fully give their attention to the patient while your med students are maybe scribes, and they're learning how to listen. They're learning by watching their mentor, their instructor, on how you interact, how you start to build that skill and that expertise, and teasing out those little things that could trip you up in developing a diagnosis and putting a patient on the right path. I thought that was a great suggestion on Ed's part. Don't know if there's anyone out there that's doing such a program, but I thought, you know what, that's got some legs.
Well, it sounds like it's a first step, or at least he's offering up an idea that could be a solution. Obviously, we're all talking about this, and if we're talking about it, other people are at least thinking about it, or talking about it amongst themselves. So,
Yeah.
this is an issue.
Well, just to underscore the fact that this is a real conversation, and even though we keep it very light and we're very courteous to each other, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I have a little bit of a problem with this scribe thing.
Mm.
Now, I don't have any problem with having a medical student in the room with me and recording a medical history based on my conversation with the patient, and let's talk about it later and that sort of thing. But I think that it is profoundly important for every physician to create the medical record themselves.
Mm.
He or she needs to create the record for this patient themselves. And this is not something that can be done by clicking boxes in an electronic medical record. I learned as much as a medical student when patients would come in the hospital. Many times they had prior admissions, and we sent to medical records. We got all the old charts, and I would read every word of those histories and physicals and op notes and discharge summaries. I learned more than I would have learned in 1,000 textbooks.
I tend to agree with that in a big way. I found similar thing. I noticed, in that transition going from handwritten charts that I would read and I would write and I'd give it thought, and then I'd read my colleagues' notes, from other services to see how they were looking at this. And you look things up, and then you look through other parts of the chart, and it was all there. That was that true record. What we have now is just, it's cut and paste a lot of times. And you also, because everybody's in a rush, you're not going back through that history the way you used to.
There's nothing to read.
That's right.
I've been asked by some defense attorneys to review records in order to prepare for a defense for a malpractice action. There's just not anything in there. There's nothing in there.
It's listen, that we already, and people are starting to get dinged on that. Yeah, there you go. But, even you think about it, when you
high quality graphics on this show.
It's like see one, do one, teach one. But when think about it though too, when you write something out and you keep writing it over and over again, and you've written it hundreds of times, even if you're writing labs back in the chart, writing the little fish bones and those little things, guess what? You've learned how to do that, and just even how to write out a full H&P, all that stuff.
I felt like, don't you feel
it
like
wasn't always the most efficient thing, but man, you did learn a lot.
Yep.
Don't you think they drove all this EMR? They claimed it was for efficiency, but then as the hospitals drove it on us, it was all about the dollar.
Yeah.
They wanted you to code at a higher level, and then you get, so even if you were charging a level 3, you've got documentation for level 5, and all this kind of mumbo jumbo. It had nothing to do with patient care. It was just about the dollar.
That's
and
exactly
also there was
what
a lot
it became.
and look at all the data that was being mined too, that basically enabled payers to determine, what would be reimbursed, what we could, ding you on, and it just became an elaborate way of kind of, doing that too.
Well, Des, take it another step. I mean, from that, we've changed that topic now, but don't get me going on that one, because that's what drove. And it started when I was doing cardiac. They'd start telling me what they would use, and I'd say, no, you won't. But yes, they would. And eventually I wasn't doing it anymore, and they did. But like in wound care, I'd come back from that meeting and there'd be tons of neat stuff. And absolutely, I'd say out of 100 products, I could get 99 of them. No way.
Exactly.
Unless I stole it from your company and brought it back and used it on the slide, I couldn't get. Oh, it's too expensive. Well, we can't stock that. Well, then what am I here for? You can run this with a PA and tape.
This is one of those issues that has reared its ugly head for sure.
Anyway. That moves us into the whole question of healthcare economics, which is that'll be a lengthy conversation.
There you go.
Yes. Well, just kind of looking at the time, and I think we've once again kind of blown through our little segment here. So I want to just kind of give everybody one chance for last little thoughts on what we talked about today, the art of conversation. Rhonda, ladies first.
Thank you. It's very simple. Don't underestimate the power of human interaction. It's highly valuable and needed more today than ever.
Amen.
Amen to that.
Randy?
Listen carefully and think even more carefully before you speak.
Great words of advice, especially in today's world. Great advice. Measure those words. Rick?
I was going to say, listen carefully. The human touch is important, and don't push send.
That's another topic as well. I love that one. No, I appreciate everybody's, thoughts today, and then having this conversation. We needed to have this little talk because it's an important one. We are affected by what's happening too. And we will be down the road. And so, where we, as we see how medicine's evolving and the use of technology and, that less and less human interaction, it's certainly a concern. And at the end of the day, again, we are social creatures. We need each other, for better or worse. And that's just, that's the human condition, I guess. So, with that, I want to thank everybody for being part of our discussion today, and I hope we enjoyed it. Like Rick was saying, it's fascinating to think that people literally around the world could be listening in on our conversation. We had some great stories today. Great stories. Randy, I love the one about Dr. Harrison especially, but you guys have so much experience too in the paths that have crossed in this little group. It's pretty remarkable. So this is really what goes on inside the doctor's lounge. Honest, unfiltered conversations, certainly not scripted. And if you like what we're doing, we want you to subscribe to our channel. Just ring the bell, and certainly check out Dr. Cook's wonderful, again, RX for Success podcast, coming up to his 1 year anniversary. So we're going to do something special for him. And it's been fun watching and listening to his show evolve. And we certainly know that that's what's going on here too. So with that, I just want to thank again my colleagues, Rhonda Crow, Dr. Randy Cook, and the yin to your yang, Dr. Rick Zollinger. Had to get that one in. I'm your host, Dr. Desmond Bell. Remember that we see you, We believe in you and we're here for you. Until next time, inside the doctor's lounge.
Very good.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
I'm recording this conversation right now on a device that is sometimes known as a phone. It's really interesting to me because as phones have become more sophisticated, they're used less and less for verbal communication as they are for other activities such as emails, texting, social media, photography, recording music, you name it. So where we are as phones have become more sophisticated, our ability to communicate verbally, it seems, has deteriorated to the fact and to the point that we felt this need today to talk about the lost art of conversation. You know, conversation is so important amongst people because we're social creatures. We need each other. We need to hear human voices. We need to hear music. We need to hear all sorts of things. But the point is that we need each other, and to have conversation, even in medicine, is so important. And when I say conversation, I'm not talking about just talking to your patients. I'm talking about listening to your patients. There's so much value in that, and certainly in how we interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. You know, we heard some great stories today, especially my favorite was what Randy was talking about, his encounter with Dr. Harrison, the man who was behind Harrison's Internal Medicine and the American College of Cardiology. This is stuff that you can't put a price tag on, and this is what makes talking inside the doctor's lounge so much fun. We never know where the conversation's going to go. Give us a topic and we'll talk about it, and I'm sure that there'll be some really interesting results that come of it. So anyway, we hope that you enjoy what we're doing as much as we love bringing it to you. I'm so fortunate to be around these people. Rhonda Crow, the CEO of MD Coaches, Dr. Randy Cook, who does a bang-up job hosting RX for Success, his podcast, and Dr. Rick Zollinger. Three great people, and I'll tell you what, I am truly fortunate to be able to spend time with them each week. So we hope that you are enjoying this too. If you like what we're doing, by all means, please sign up, be part of us, ring that bell that you see on your screen. And by all means, continue to be part of this. We hope that maybe you'll be on a future episode of Inside the Doctor's Lounge. Until then, though, I'd just like to remind you that we see you, we believe in you, and we're here for you. Until next time, Inside the Doctor's Lounge, I'm your host, Dr. Desmond Bell. Take care.